I am the girl who will like walk into a store. I don't know, I black out. That I enjoyed, and I had that moment of like, here you go again. And this is probably going to sound a little crazy. What were you thinking? What were you thinking? Why can't I talk about this book? And now for something a little bit lighter. Hi everyone, I'm Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today's video is kind of a mid-month check-in on my December reading, and I am doing Cloak and Dagger Christmas, so I have a few books from that TBR, but I also have two other books outside of it that I really enjoyed and I'm kind of desperate to talk about, so I figured why not hop on here and just do it now. The first book I read is The Neighbors by Hannah Mary McKinnon, and this is a domestic thriller which focuses on Abby and her husband Nate and their neighbors Liam and his wife Nancy. And the premise for this book, so back in 1992, Abby caused a fatal car crash which kills her brother. And a car was on the scene when they saw the crash, and out of that car comes Nate. And Abby is filled with all sorts of guilt from having caused the crash and killed her brother, and Nate is sharing in her guilt because he couldn't save her brother. So the two of them wind up forming this bond, and she kind of pushes everyone out of her life, winds up leaving with Nate, and on they go and they wind up getting married. So we fast forward to 20 years, and Nate and Abby are married. They have a daughter in high school, kind of going about their lives, and the house next door is up for sale, and in move these neighbors, Liam and his wife Nancy and their son. And Abby takes one look at him, and Liam is her boyfriend from back in the day when that car crash happened, and he is one of the people that she shoved out of her life and cut off all ties with. So don't ask me why. But Liam and Abby decide that they're not going to tell anybody that they know each other, and they pretend like they're complete strangers. And their respective spouses have no idea who the other one is, have no idea that they have any history with each other, but they become a part of each other's lives because they're neighbors, their kids are almost the same age, and they get along. And Abby's husband thinks they're great, and they're doing dinner parties, and Liam's wife thinks Abby and her husband are great, so they're doing all sorts of things together. So obviously what winds up happening is Abby and Liam are having to deal with this tension of what their past is and kind of hiding that secret from their spouses. And the story winds up being told sort of back in 1992 and then in the present day, and then it's also told from different character perspectives. So you're getting all sorts of different stories through all sorts of different people's eyes. Things are starting to piece together. Abby doesn't remember really anything leading up to the accident, so her memory is kind of starting to come back together a little bit. So you've kind of got all of these different things, all the trains are leaving the station, and they're all going to come together at some stage. I really liked this book. It moved at a really good clip. I talked about this on my Goodreads review also. I loved Liam's wife, Nancy, and I want her to have like a whole spin-off book or like a prequel or something, because she's such a good character and she's in it a ton, but I still don't feel like I got enough of her. So I loved her. And what I also loved, I will be honest, I read a ton of thrillers, but I am never the girl who really figures it out. And at one point during this book, I was like, oh, okay, I think I know something that's happening. And this is not to say that anything was easy to figure out in the book, because I always think I know what's happening, and it's never actually what happens. But in this book, I actually did figure one thing out, so I felt so good about myself. But there was also other stuff I didn't figure out. So make no mistake, this is not like an easy riddle to solve, but it's a great ride. The characters are great. There's tons of good like 90s kind of pop culture references and songs and things like that in it, which is kind of one of my soft spots. So if you're looking for a good domestic thriller, if you're looking for a good ride, if you're looking for some great characters, I would definitely give this one a go because it was a quick read. I really enjoyed it, and I would say this was definitely a hit for me this month. The next book I read is Tangerine by Christine Mangan, and this was the first book I read for Cloak and Dagger Christmas. And this is a mystery, but I would say it's light on the mystery, which doesn't take anything away from the book, but my expectations were not quite in line with what the book actually is. And this book follows Lucy and Alice, who were roommates in college, takes place in the 50s, and then it kind of picks up a year and a half after there's an accident, which is the last night that the girls see each other or talk to each other while they're in college. So they were in school in New England, and the book picks up in Tangier, which is where Alice is living with her husband. And one day, Lucy literally shows up on their doorstep with a suitcase and is kind of like, hey, I'm here. And it's the 50s, so it's not like there was Facebook or a way for Lucy to just sort of find out where she was living, since they haven't spoken in a year and a half. So it's a little strange that she's shown up on her doorstep. Alice is a bit taken aback, and we also don't quite know what happened between fast friends when they first meet in college and totally inseparable, that accident, and today. So this is a past tense, present tense, much like how The Neighbors was. It's told from both the women's viewpoints. So you're starting to kind of get little breadcrumbs about what happened. You're seeing their relationship now and how there's an ease but an unease between them. And then Alice's husband is there, and he doesn't know who Lucy is, and he's kind of wondering why the stranger is not only visiting, but has a suitcase and basically moved in and is like, well, I'm just sort of here, period. So she starts to live with them, which nobody seems to question. Weird, maybe? I don't know. So you see this relationship between the women, and you start to see sort of how that relationship formed, and you're trying to figure out what went wrong. And meanwhile, Alice, who has always been the shy one and the introvert, is really struggling with this life in Morocco, and her husband relocated them there. And Lucy has always been the extrovert and the one who pushed Alice and kind of forced her out of her comfort zone. So she's trying to do that exact same thing in Morocco. So you see that part of their relationship. And then John disappears. So you've got that part of the mystery. So I would say I liked this book, but I didn't love it. And I think one of the things that I struggled with, and I've heard other people say this as well, is it's a slow moving book. And I think when you're used to thrillers that move at a fast pace, and I read this, like I put The Neighbors down and probably took an hour off, and then I picked this up. It took me a little bit to readjust my pace and my expectations for this book. But once I did, I was in it and I was in a good groove and I really enjoyed it. There's a lot, reading this and thinking about writing, I really enjoyed the weaving of the story. So I took a lot of great stuff away from this one. I would definitely say to pick it up if you have a curiosity about it. So I did really like it, just not a love book for me. The next book is Three Blind Mice by Agatha Christie, and I actually did this on an audiobook. And this was my first audiobook that I've ever done in my life. And my first plan was to just take this out of the library, and they didn't have it, but I saw that they had an audiobook of it online, and I decided, this is me taking the plunge. This is how crazy things are getting in my life right now. So I did the audiobook. I listened to it in one afternoon. It's a novella, so it was easy enough to do, and it was really good, and I really enjoyed the experience of it. The story is you have a husband and wife, Giles and Molly, and they are new owners of an inn, which they are opening for the first time. And they have a few guests that are coming in, and meanwhile there's a blizzard. So the guests arrive, the blizzard arrives, they are cut off from everyone else around them, the phones are dead, and hey, there's a homicidal maniac on the loose in the inn. So this is an Agatha Christie kind of typical people locked in one location, so kind of Murder on the Orient Express type of a thing. You have a cast of characters, they're secluded into one location and somebody's dead and they're trying to figure out why, who, what is happening here, and please don't let me be the next one. So this takes place over the course of a couple of days. It's a pretty small cast of characters, I think, for an Agatha Christie. I think there's maybe 6, which I think is why it was also very manageable for me on audiobook. It was easy to follow. I have nothing bad to say about it. This is the book or the novella that wound up becoming the play The Mousetrap, which is the longest running play in history, I think. So I would definitely read it. If you're an Agatha Christie fan, read it. If you're looking for kind of an enjoyable mystery, go for it. I would absolutely sign off on doing the audiobook of it because it was great. So all in, nothing bad to say about this one. This was another win for me. The next book I read is Murder is Binding by Lorna Barrett, and I grabbed the ebook of this one from my library. And this is a cozy mystery. It is the first in a series. I hadn't read it before, I hadn't heard of it before, and I was just looking for a cozy as part of Cloak and Dagger Christmas, and I wanted to read something where I wasn't familiar with any of the characters or any of the stories. So I talked about this in a different video. I love a good Hallmark movie and mystery, and they have a whole bunch of movie series which are based on cozies. And every once in a while I need a break from the Gillian Flynn and the autopsies and the serial killers and all that kind of stuff that I also like to read. So this was a nice one for me. And I read it relatively quickly. It was everything I expected it was going to be. And it was just a good, kind of easy story. So this follows Trisha Miles, and she is the new gal in town. She's been there for 6 months in small town New Hampshire, and she opens a mystery bookstore in a row of other kind of antique shops and gift shops and bookstores. Of course, one of the booksellers is kind of a jerk. Her name's Doris. Nobody likes her. Doris picks fights with people. Doris is mean to people. Doris is just kind of painted as a terrible human being. And when her store is set on fire and Trisha finds Doris dead inside, everybody thinks Trisha's the one who did it because they've had some rubs and because Trisha's from out of town. So of course, nobody from fabulous Stoneham could possibly be a killer. It's got to be that girl. Trisha then spends the rest of her days in the book trying to prove that she's not the killer. And her sister comes into town, who is like half comic relief sidekick, half Watson to her Sherlock. And because Trisha owns a mystery bookstore and has read every mystery book ever, of course she can solve the crime. But she's a little bit distracted by a few possible love interests. But are they good guys or are they bad guys, and what are their motivations? So you have all of these things that you get in a cozy happening. And like I said, it was good. It was a good read. It was everything I expected it to be. I won't hesitate to pick up another book in this series. So I do have one beef with this book. And I realize telling this is probably going to make me sound insane, but I'm going to do it anyway because I did it in my Goodreads review, so it's already out in the universe. So I read the ebook version of this, and I read it in massive font. So it was like 500 pages. And it's like 1 or 2 sentences in this book that if it was a book, I would have wanted to throw it across the room, that it made me so angry. And I'm probably being crazy. Okay, so I'm gonna set the scene. This has no spoilers in it. So our sheriff in town, Wendy, is described basically as being like frumpy, and her uniform strains across her body, and she's not married. So at one point, Trisha thinks one of these local guys in town makes for a great suspect, but Wendy disagrees, and she's known this guy her entire life, and she just is like, no, absolutely not, he couldn't have done it. But Trisha thinks that because Wendy looks the way she looks and she doesn't have a man, and because this particular guy happens to be so handsome and he's a huge flirt and he's really charming, she thinks that Wendy is like blinded by this man's flirtatious, kind of words and actions, and that he's kind of only treating her that way so that he will divert suspicion from being a suspect. And then these lines happen. A man skilled in manipulation, he could have said the same thing to Wendy Adams, and she, being plain, overweight, and never married, chose to believe him. What is that? Ugh. I absolutely am like nuts bananas over this. I mean, I finished this book a few weeks ago. Like I said, it was 500 pages. We're talking about one run-on sentence, and I'm like a dog with a bone. This still gives me complete rage. Why is it that because she's got a few extra pounds and she's never been married, she couldn't see through some guy if he was just manipulating her and using her? Like, maybe she's known him her entire life, and maybe he's never done anything to make her doubt that he's a good guy. Or maybe she always sees the best in people, or maybe she knows something that we don't know, or 10 other reasons why she might be dismissing this guy as a suspect, other than the fact that she's never been married before. So, oh my God, this poor single woman, she can't possibly decipher between someone taking advantage of her and someone actually caring about her. Ugh. I don't know. I mean, I like ranting. I realize I probably sound like I'm insane. I'm okay with that. So If you think I'm crazy cakes, totally tell me below that I'm being crazy. I totally don't even care. But this really bugged me. I mean, I soldiered on and I finished the book. It's not a reason to not pick up the book, but it just, I don't know. Maybe I'm projecting my own crap into this thing, but that just left me with like a meh taste in my mouth. Other than that, get the book though. It was good. Okay, let's switch gears from the rage and talk about Girl Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollis. So this is sort of self-improvement, self-help, motivation type of a book. And this came out back in February. I was not particularly familiar with Rachel Hollis before this book came out. And if you're not, Google her because a ton of stuff's going to come up. But she's a motivational speaker. She's an entrepreneur. She has a lifestyle blog. She's a mom. She's a wife. She's like 100 other things. She's got this crazy Instagram following. This is a book I picked up late summer when I was looking for something that was going to answer all of my problems and be the magic bullet and be kind of the self-improvement motivation help that I was looking for. So I tried to read 2 chapters of it. I didn't like it. I got really mad at myself for wasting money on this, threw it on the shelf, and the world kept turning. But then, after the success of Three Blind Mice, I went down the rabbit hole of what else does my library have on audiobook, and I was doing a lot of searching and just kind of browsing around, and Girl Wash Your Face showed up there on audiobook. And I thought, here comes fate coming my way and saying, give this another chance. So I got the free audiobook of it, and like I hesitate to say life-changing, but I loved this book. So here's that proof of it. And I have so much to say about this book. I'm going to do a whole separate video on it. But briefly, what I will say is if you're going to read it, I would 100% recommend the audiobook. She narrates it. It is literally like talking to a friend. And because I had this book, I actually followed along with it. And I wrote, I'm sure some people would like cringe to death if they saw what I do to my books, but like I write all over them. It is very no nonsense. It's 20 chapters and each chapter is a lie that, we are told. And it's, I'm not a good mom. I'm not a good writer. I need a drink. I'm defined by my weight. I'll start tomorrow. And it's how she believed these lies and then how she got to the other side of not believing these lies. And she tells her stories and it's heartbreaking and it's motivational, and she talks about her marriage and her family and her brother who passed away, and she talks about her career and her children, and she talks about trying to become a foster parent and trying to adopt, and there's so much in this very tiny book, and it's really powerful, it's really inspirational. I'm borderline obsessed. I just think it's so great. But if you're interested in this, if you're on the fence about this, I would say give it a go. I would also say a takeaway I have, and I believe this about all books. There is a time and a place for books, and the first time I picked this up, clearly I was just not in the right place for it. And even if I had forced myself to read it, I don't think it would have been a good experience. And this second time around, it was absolutely the right book at absolutely the right time. And this is the book that I will pick up again, and I will reference again, and I will read again. I just think it's great. So hats off. This is a great one. Okay, so that is everything that I've finished so far. And right now I am in the midst of all these beautiful strangers. So this is like 500 pages. I have about 130 pages left to read. The rest of my plan for the rest of this day is to finish this book. So I will use the word obsessed for this book. This book I had such high expectations for, and it has not let me down yet. I'm knocking on wood. Stay tuned to hear more about this one, but so far this has been absolutely amazing. So I cannot wait to devour the rest of this one this afternoon. So that's it for my mid-month check-in. I would love to hear what you guys are reading so far. I would love to hear if you have read any of these books. It's been, like I said, it's been a good month so far, and I am proud of myself for doing the audiobook. I'm excited to do more audiobooks. I'm really just kind of jumping all over the library bandwagon again, and I've discovered Hoopla, and I've discovered Libby, and I feel like this whole new woman. So let me know what you're listening to, let me know what you're reading, let me know how your month is going, and if you liked these kinds of mid-month check-ins, definitely give this a thumbs up, and if you want to hang out some more and hear what else I have to say about Rachel Hollis or All These Beautiful Strangers, hit that subscribe button, and you can find me back here next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye.